Conflicts overseas are back in focus on trading floors. In today's cover story, how airlines are dealing with turbulence around the globe. Plus, the hedge fund manager who paid big bucks for lunch with Warren Buffett. And crop shock as harvest season gets underway. First Business starts now.
You're watching First Business. Financial news, analysis, and today's investment ideas.
Good morning, I'm Angela Miles. It's Wednesday, September 24th. In today's First Look, another triple dip. The Dow plummeted 117 points, the Nasdaq 19 and the S&P 11 Tuesday, making it 3 sell-off sessions in a row. Gold rallied $7 and oil 76 cents. Bed Bath & Beyond wows Wall Street. The retailer top profit estimates after the close. Shares shot up 6%. Amazon is set to collect sales tax in Minnesota October 1st. And the Sony PlayStation TV set-top box will be in stores October 14th. Let's get busy now with Larry Schober of SFG Alternatives to talk about the trading day. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
So these airstrikes against ISIL, how is that affecting the market?
Well, I think definitely affecting the market, especially we saw it in the treasuries yesterday. But I think it's just one of those things that's no worse than feared. So, yeah, the market's definitely a little bit anxious about it all.
Commodities are getting crushed, and it seems to be affecting a number of commodity-related stocks, such as oil stocks. What do you see out there happening?
Yeah, and I think it's just a long-term trend. I mean, a lot of it is U.S. dollar strength, and I think that's going to continue. If you believe that's the case, then you're going to see a dwindling of commodity prices, especially agriculture and energy.
There are some technicians out there who believe the Russell 2000 is looking toppy. What do you have to say about that thought?
I think it could be, but boy, I'll tell you what, a lot's going to be known in the next few weeks when we start the Q3 earnings. I mean, the Russell's done a great job this year, and I think we're going to continue to see cyclical momentum in the U.S., and that can help the small cap stocks.
Where are you putting your money? Healthcare stocks had a nice rally this week.
Yeah, they did. But, you know, I still think financials and materials make sense. It's a conservative play. I think as interest rates rise, that's going to help the stock portfolio with banks. I also think that the housing recovery is a multi-year story, not very sexy, but I think a 5% a year story from now for the next 5 years or so.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Talk of tax inversions is rattling the stock market. Chuck Hopla has more.
The U.S. Treasury Department takes aim at so-called tax inversions. Secretary Jack Lew outlined the new rules Tuesday. The Treasury Department took action under 5 sections of the tax code. It will now be more difficult for a U.S. company to reincorporate overseas to lower its tax bill. Shares of several companies pursuing inversions tumbled Tuesday, including Burger King, which plans to buy Canada's Tim Hortons chain, and drug maker AbbVie, which has plans to buy Ireland-based Shire.
Arab Bank is the largest financial firm in Jordan, and it's now on the hook for assisting terrorist group Hamas. A federal jury in New York reached a landmark verdict against the Middle Eastern bank. Lawyers say the case against the bank was filed by nearly 300 Americans who were injured in the attacks in early 2000 or were relatives of victims. It's considered the first terrorism financing civil case to go to court in the U.S.
A startling new Ebola worst-case scenario from the CDC. The disease could sicken 1.4 million people by January. In addition to the humanitarian crisis, the epidemic is also taking a huge economic toll on West African countries poorly positioned to sustain it. Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia's manufacturing, mining, and construction sectors have all been hard hit. The outbreak has not had a major impact on economies outside the immediate area, yet the World Bank says the economic impact could easily reach into the billions.
The government is conducting a security checkup on healthcare.gov. The Health and Human Services Department reveals that a group of ethical hackers found a critical vulnerability when attempting to breach the health exchange marketplace earlier this year. However, hackers were blocked from trying to exploit the security weakness. The government concludes the site is secure but needs some improvements.
A crossover is happening in the insurance industry. Insurance giants Blue Cross Blue Shield and State Farm will both sell health insurance plans. State Farm, best known for home and auto insurance, is now selling health insurance policies created by Blue Cross. The policies will be sold in Illinois, Montana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. The next round of open enrollment for health care coverage begins November 15th.
General Motors is steering its Cadillac brand in a whole new direction. GM is shifting the Caddy headquarters from Detroit to New York. The plan is to put more distance between the luxury brand and the rest of General Motors. Kelsey Mays of Cars.com has this take.
We have to remember this is only about 120 people in sales and marketing. Cadillac's major operations, product development, technology, all of these things will remain in and around the Detroit area with the rest of General Motors.
In 1998, Ford moved its headquarters for Lincoln and Mercury to California, but then relocated back to the Motor City a couple of years later.
In today's cover story, a more than week-long strike by Air France pilots has been extended until Friday. Pilots fear that their wages will be cut as the airline expands its low-cost unit, Transavia. And air traffic controllers in Italy are planning an 8-hour strike for this Saturday. Both circumstances creating an unsettling backdrop for airline and airport representatives meeting in Chicago. At the 20th annual conference, where 800 airport officials pitched nearly 300 airlines to fly to their cities, there's concern that despite record profits in the second quarter among U.S. carriers, $3.6 billion, up 64% from the same period last year, margins may be affected as airlines try to avoid war zones in Ukraine and Syria.
I think at this conference, in the route planners world, they're definitely looking at options. And we mentioned before that the equipment is going to be very important. If we have a Dreamliner that can climb at 38, 39, 40,000 feet and still clear some of this airspace, I think that's the equipment that we'll use to bypass the potential of any problems.
For participants from Vancouver, whose 18 million passengers last year make it Canada's second busiest airport after Toronto, the meetings are less about international conflict and more about expanding connections, particularly between South America and Asia.
If you actually take a line on a globe from, say, Sao Paulo to Beijing, Vancouver's on that line. So it's a pure geographic twist of fate. We are right on a direct line between most cities in South America and Asia. So that means less time in the air, less fuel for airlines, less hassle for passengers.
A public-private partnership called Brand USA unveiled a promotional effort this week called Market the Welcome as it tries to reach its goal of 100 million international tourists to the U.S. by 2021. Brand USA says it can trace its efforts last year to more than 1 million visitors who spent nearly $3.5 billion supporting 53,000 jobs. But air travel can still produce a bumpy ride. About 200 Air France pilots protested outside France's National Assembly Tuesday. The airline says that the walkout is costing the equivalent of roughly $25 million a day.
In our earnings watch, Carnival is cruising along. The company exceeded Wall Street's expectations and lifted its guidance for the year. The cruise line has plans to dip deeper into the global market, including China. Also, passenger ticket sales are up 3.3% compared to last year, and passengers are spending 10% more. Shares have recovered from last year's mishaps. And CarMax reported earnings that failed to match estimates. The nation's largest used car seller is feeling the pinch of Americans choosing to buy new cars. Shares stalled out, falling about 9.5%.
A bumper crop season. Farmers have begun their harvest of what could become record-sized corn crops. The pace of this year's harvest is actually behind schedule, but that's because the yields have been so high. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has rated 75% of the crops as either good or excellent. And with so much supply on the market, corn futures are at a 4-year low. Wheat futures have also fallen. Trader Jack Scoville of Price Futures Group says crops thrived due to the cool summer.
It's been a very cool and wet summer, and that's what led to the big production. Both soybeans and corn, especially with the new genetics, do very, very well with this type of weather. The last time we had a summer like this several years ago is also the last time we had record-breaking yields.
Traders are keeping an eye on soybean futures, also near 4-year lows. It's due to speculation over larger than expected demand coming from China.
President Obama tells leaders gathered at the United Nations that they are the last generation that will have the power to prevent a global catastrophe. The president added that every nation has a responsibility to act in the face of climate change. Google has also stepped into the climate change debate by cutting its ties with the conservative group ALEC because it denies climate change is happening.
So much for trickle-down economics. Billionaires are hoarding rather than spending their cash. Among the world's wealthiest, the average amount of cash each is holding onto is $600 million. That's equivalent to an average of 19% of their net worths. Cash holdings far outweigh more traditional investments by the wealthy, such as real estate. The new MSN Money survey signals that the wealthiest are still nervous about investing their money in the market now and are waiting for a more optimal time.
Luxury brand Jimmy Choo will become the first upscale shoe label to go public. The high-end brand says it will pursue an initial public offering later this year in London. It is expected to sell at least 25% of its holding company, Jimmy Choo Limited. The offering could value the company around $1 billion. The shoes are popular with a well-heeled crowd, selling between $600 and $1,600 per pair. The brand shot to fame with a strong showing in HBO hit series Sex and the City. On the economic calendar for today, it's the MBA Mortgage Index, new home sales, and crude inventories. And on the earnings calendar, KB Home, Accenture, H.B. Fuller, Vail Resorts, and Paychex. Still to come, a hedge fund manager who is channeling his inner Warren Buffett after having lunch with the investor icon. Plus, the NFL's domestic abuse scandals are putting a spotlight on the C-suite and how Americans can avoid running out of cash in retirement. Don't miss it. As Americans live longer, many fear running out of money. Well, the Nationwide Retirement Institute suggests maximizing retirement money by waiting until a full retirement age for Social Security. One example, Americans born between 1943 and 1954 taking Social Security benefits at 62 versus 66 lose about 25% of the monthly value of Social Security checks. Research also shows 80% of women are turning to Social Security too quickly and are missing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars. Bill Mahler joins me now with an NFL update. Bill.
NFL players behaving badly. Angie, it's caused a lot of embarrassment for the league, and of course, it's drawn a lot of important attention to violent behavior that some men bring to bear against women and children. Domestic violence is what it's called. But beyond professional athletes, the conversation needs to include all of society, including the workplace. Dr. Susan Weitzman, she's a psychotherapist and an author. Her specialty, in fact, is in violence that takes place in the upper echelons, and her latest book is entitled Not Two People Like Us. Susan, do we have any idea how common this is in the C-suite?
Only if you're measuring unicorns. So it's a population that's housed by a veil of silence. But what I do know is in my practice, I get at least 100 emails a week, and the book's been out quite a while now. In my practice, who I work with, who I testify for, we're hearing this all over the place in what I call upscale violence.
Yeah, it takes place, in fact, in the C-suite between spouses. Let me ask
Absolutely.
you, what kind of practices or policies do businesses have in terms of domestic violence?
I don't think there's any. I mean, if Ray Rice was in a corporate office, I don't think anything would happen to him.
So is it because they don't think it's a problem, or that they're willfully not trying to acknowledge it?
I think corporations won't purposely go to this topic because it's so touchy, and because everyone says it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen to people like us, but it does. And I think the call to action is there should be some policies for it so that it isn't just an NFL player.
Now, the kind of policy that some people are talking about for the NFL, that being zero tolerance?
Zero tolerance. And there should be consequences. I don't think that punishment for domestic abusers should be dependent upon economic or celebrity factors, and it is too often.
Is it because the businesses aren't in the public spotlight like professional athletes are?
Right. Most CEOs don't have fans. They're not going to be on TMZ with their videos if something happens to them. So it's easier to hush it up. I think there's a conspiracy, so to speak, not literally, but there's a collective denial of what's happening in the population among that population.
And you're championing this cause, I know, all over the media.
All over, everywhere I can. We're doing an interfaith project right now in the Chicago area. But I've talked to the World Bank, I've talked around the country. People come out when they hear this and they go, this is happening. No one else is talking about it, but it does exist.
Dr. Susan Weitzman, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, a top Facebook executive showing some character in a new comic book. And let's do lunch. One man's takeaway from a chew and chat with Warren Buffett. We'll be right back. Facebook is attempting to gain an edge in online advertising. The Wall Street Journal reports next week Facebook will roll out its revamped Atlas ad platform. The system will help marketers have a more exact idea of how many ads are reaching users. Facebook is in a heated race to rule the online ad space, currently dominated by Google. Facebook stock is currently trading around $78.
The #2 executive at Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, stars in a comic book coming out this week. It's being published as part of the Female Force series by Blue Water Productions. That's the same group behind her book Lean In. Hillary Clinton, Tina Fey, and Michelle Obama have also been featured comic book style.
Guy Spire, hedge fund manager and author of The Education of a Value Investor, plunked down $650,000 to have lunch with billionaire investor Warren Buffett. Thanks for coming on our show today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Angie.
$650,000, you got a great deal. Most people have to spend about $1 million. So what did you learn from Mr. Buffett?
The main thing that I learned was to tune into myself, to tune out the world, to march to the beat of my own drummer. Warren Buffett, at the lunch, I realized up front and close that he clearly was marching to the beat of his own drummer, and that I should do the same thing.
And you put this all together in your book, and you are now teaching people how to become value investors. So what's your biggest tip here?
Well, the biggest tip and the biggest thing that I have in the book has got very little to do with investing and a lot to do with life. And I think that the journey that I started off on, I felt like it was all about buying cheap stocks. And I realized actually it's all about being authentic and being real. So I went on a journey where I was motivated by greed, and what I came out with was a better understanding of why greed is not the most important thing, the accumulation of wealth is not the most important thing.
Give me an example. What is an authentic investment to you?
Authenticity in investment means I do it professionally, is to be honest and upfront with my investors about what I don't know, to be honest and upfront with myself about what I don't know.
Do you buy individual stocks, or do you stick to an index or a basket of stocks?
Yeah, I buy individual stocks, but there's another great example. If an investor just indexes, uses an index, they can do extraordinarily well. That's an example of saying, you know what, I don't know enough about this, and so I'm going to index. Whereas there may be some people who fool themselves into thinking that they know more, and then they can get into trouble. So that is another example of where being real with ourselves, being honest, is actually being honest about our own shortcomings, is actually where the meat of the game is.
And that is the Buffett way. He loves the S&P 500 index. What'd you have for lunch, by the way? Is he a big eater, small eater?
The thing that I remember most about the food was he had a steak. I don't remember what kind of steak.
There you go.
That's what he likes to eat. But he loved the desserts, and he was so excited. I had my friend Monish Pabrai, who was a co-bidder with me. His two daughters were either side of him, and he loved telling them at the beginning of the lunch that he doesn't eat anything today that he didn't eat when he was 5 years old.
Interesting. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Still ahead, a home builder stock that could be constructive during the next couple of months. Chart Talk is next. Major home builder reports earnings today. Joining us now is James O'Malley of KeenOnTheMarket.com. Hello, James.
Good morning.
So what are you seeing in the charts for KB Homes?
Right, so this is a very interesting play for me here on earnings. The stock has been rather weak over the past couple of sessions here as the broader market has sold off. However, I really like KBH and I really like the space that they operate in. We've seen a lot of bullish activity in the home builders over the past couple of weeks. And if I look at how KBH reports historically, I see that they're a relatively strong stock on earnings day. The stock's rallied 5 of the past 8 quarters with an average move of around 6%. Now, it's trading in relatively neutral territory on the chart right now. However, there's a big upside resistance level around $17.50, and I think if it gets a good earnings report, which historically it does tend to do, and it breaks that level, it really could run to the upside here. So I'll be eyeing that level today, looking for an upside breakout and looking to get long should it break that upside level around $17.50.
James, what is the options market predicting about this one, say for the next month or two?
So they're looking at a move around $1.30 by this October expiration, meaning over the next 3 weeks, they're looking for a move to the upside of around $1.30, meaning it would put me just through that $17.50 level, which, like I said, is key. I think that if it makes it through that level, it could definitely outperform what the options market is implying for the end of this month.
Thank you for Chart Talk this morning, James.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today. Coming up tomorrow in Movies and Money, Outboxed. the backstory on Fox Films' runaway ticket sales at the box office. From all of us at First Business, have a wonderful Wednesday.